The following deck tech is brought to you by Dragon's Shield, the best sleeves in the business, and of course also thank you CARDMARKET. Check out the link in the description below if you wanna try out CARDMARKET for the first time in Europe. Buy yourself a booster or get some free singles. Just check it out in the description below how you can contact me. Welcome casual deck lovers. This time I was inspired by our good friend Disney.
Oh, Pinocchio.
And I felt it was time to put in the blender the deck that animates all the artifacts. Let's go! Let's start with the Geppettos of the deck, our legendary creatures. Drafna, founder of Lat-Nam, is our first one. He can copy artifact spells. He can also return artifacts to its owner's hand. Then we have Sai, master Thopterist. Whenever you cast an artifact, you create a 1/1 artifact with flying, very good, and you can also sacrifice artifacts to draw some cards. Next one, Urza, Powerstone Prodigy. This one can draw cards and discard cards, and whenever you discard an artifact, create a tapped Powerstone.
Power.
We play blue, so we have to have some card draw in our deck. We play Flow of Knowledge, a rather new instant. You can draw a card for each island you control, and then you discard 2 cards. Another draw spell that we play is this Forging the Anchor. A sorcery. You can look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal any number of artifacts and put them into your hand. Also great because we play a lot of artifacts. Stern Lesson is an instant that draws you 2 cards. You have to discard 1, but you can also create a tapped Powerstone token.
Power.
Indeed. The next one is an artifact, a famous one called Howling Mine. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an extra card, but only if the Howling Mine is untapped. Cheap artifacts is really what we wanna have in the deck, and this 1 mana Wishing Well also draws us 2 cards in case we sacrifice it. And when it enters the battlefield, it scries too. Now blue is not only the color of artifacts and card draw, but also of tricks. We play of course a copy of Counterspell in our deck, just the best blue card there is. But for diversity's sake I only play 1 copy of this all-star. Next up, a fun one, Keep Safe. You can counter target spell that targets a permanent you control, and when you do so, you also draw a card. Good 2 mana instant to protect your artifact creatures. Of course, we also need some bounce in blue, and Machine Over Matter is really great because for mostly 1 mana you can return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. And the next one is Urza's Command. This is just a very flexible card where you can choose 2 modes. You can make your opponent's creatures weaker, create a Powerstone, create an artifact, or scry 1 and then draw a card. And you see a guard approach is also a good flexible protection spell in our deck. And in case you need it, you can tap one of your opponent's creatures with it as well. Now Pinocchio was an artifact that was animated. He got a soul, so we need to play Ensoul Artifact. This is really the theme of the deck. You can play this aura on an artifact and it becomes a creature with base power and toughness 5. So that's really great when you play it on, for example, an Ornithopter. Your 0 mana 0/2 artifact with flying becomes a 5/5. Or what about this Dark Steel Relic? 0 mana for an artifact that's just indestructible. Oh wait, now it's a 5/5. And the same goes for this artifact land called Darksteel Citadel. You just play it and on turn 2 you have a 5/5 indestructible creature. So you can see with this deck we are going to do powerful things. Geppetto would be proud. We play more than 20 artifacts in this deck. Some of them are lands, but let's start with the non-lands. Search Engine is a 2 mana creature with Defender, but you can have it become an unblockable creature, or a powerful creature, or one that draws a lot of cards. Another cheap artifact is this Hangerback Walker. You can play it for 2 mana with 1 counter on it. Now the cool thing is that when this one dies, it creates a 1/1 Thopter artifact with flying for each counter on it. Of course we also need to play 2 copies of the Ornithopter. This is just a cheap artifact that you can enchant on turn 2 and then attack for 5 power in the air. The next card just gave me the idea of this deck. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a 1/1 counter on Levitating Statue. And then you can animate it by paying 2 mana. But if you just play an animation spell on it, you have a flying beast. Howling Mine is not only an iconic card, but when you create it into a creature and then start attacking with it, it will become tapped in your opponent's turn, so that opponent won't draw an extra card. I also play 2 copies of the Ichor Wellspring. It's an artifact that draws you cards and will also replace itself when it's an animated creature that dies. We already talked about the next one. It's called Darksteel Relic. I play 2 copies because this 0 costing artifact with indestructible is great when you animate it, because then you'll have a 4/4 or a 5/5 with indestructible. 2 copies in the deck and also a copy of Soul Guide Lantern. Great against decks that work with the graveyard. And of course, for 1 mana, it's a great target for animation spells. We already talked about the Witching Well, a cheap artifact that helps you search for your animation spells, and you can also sacrifice it to draw some cards. So these were most of our artifacts. Now let's look at the cards that will bring them alive.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Let's start with Animating Fairy. You can play it as a 2/2 flyer, but we will bring to life a non-creature artifact and put 4+1/+1 counters on it. Next up, of course, Ensoul Artifact. This is the key card in the deck because it only costs 2 mana and you can make a 5/5 artifact that is attacking on turn 2. When I played Mono Blue in my Brothers War draft, I always loved this card with the Levitating Statue. A bit more expensive than Ensoul Artifact, but it draws you a card as well, so that's great. Sometimes you have a lot of non-creature artifacts, and that's the time to draw Rise and Shine, because then you can overload it, put 4 counters on all these non-creature artifacts, and they will all become creatures.
Sacre bleu!
Sacre bleu indeed, because there is more. We also have the skilled animator that when it enters the battlefield, it animates, of course, a artifact and makes it a artifact creature with power and toughness 5/5. Then there's Tezzeret the Artifice Master. This one I play because it creates a lot of colorless artifact tokens and also it can draw you a lot of cards. It's ultimate, that's just gravy. Next up, the Antiquities War. For 2 turns you will be searching your top 5 cards for an artifact, and in the 3rd turn this saga is in play, they will become, of course, 5/5s. The last one is this legendary black Staff of the Waterdeep. You can choose to not untap it and you can activate it to have an artifact become a 4/4. This deck is full of 1-offs and 2-offs. It has a very low mana base and that's why we only play 21 lands. We're gonna play 12 islands. I chose this art because it's very artifacty, and let's see what other lands we play. Let's start with Academy Ruins. This land can have you put artifacts from your graveyard on top of your library. It used to be pricey, but now it's reprinted a few times, so make sure to pick it up. Next up, Darksteel Citadel. I do want to keep it casual, but I just can't resist playing 3 copies of this indestructible artifact land. I just love going to town on turn 2 with a 5/5. Mystic Sanctuary is an island, and that's important. It can help you replay your counterspell and put it on the top of your library. Another card is an artifact land that's giving you blue mana. That's important. It's called Seed of the Synod. You can of course animate it because it's also an artifact. It just doesn't have indestructible like the Citadel. And our last land is the Surgical Bay. Just 1 copy of a land that we can sacrifice to draw a card. So make sure to take a screenshot of this full Pinocchio deck. Really enjoy building it and I love playing with it. As always, you can find the deck list also in the description below the video and you can build this deck for under $50 US. Let me know in the comments below what deck you wanna see me put in the casual blender, or maybe you like to have me build a tribal deck. Just let me know in the comments, and as always, keep it casual.